to the Leadership Institute Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast for February. We live in interesting times. How'd you like that State of the Union speech? It was pretty good. Many of you know that I subscribe to both daily newspapers, the Washington Times and the Washington Post at my home. My practice generally is to get up, go out and get the two papers, read through pretty carefully the Washington Times, and then skim through the Washington Post. That way I limit the amount of poison I have to ingest every morning. But it is interesting often to compare and contrast the two papers. One of them quite conservative and one of them very much to the left, and to see how they diverge, or in some cases how they are similar. This morning's Washington Times has a picture of the president giving his speech, and the headline reads, "Trump faces down Democrats." And the subheadline is, "Turns Chamber of Impeachment into room of many celebrations." But very interesting is, as well at least, is the Washington Post. There's a picture of the president giving his remarks, and the headline reads, "Trump sees vindication in the economy," and the subheadline is, "As job approval rises, he claims immigration and foreign policy wins." Yeah. And I think that's interesting because conceptually, the two newspapers kind of agree as to what went on. And since what went on was powerful for the president, the fact that the Post has to admit it, I find interesting. I encourage you to live tweet today's event. The hashtag is on the screen. Quick summary. In 2019, the Leadership Institute trained 13,585 students in 454 individual trainings, way more on the average of one per day. And in the 40 years since 1979, when I founded the Institute, your Leadership Institute had trained at the end of December 22,659 students. You have before you on that orange or peach colored sheet of paper the Leadership Institute schedule for upcoming months. Note that there are many other programs that will be added, but these are currently scheduled schools, and I urge you to take a moment to review these schools and consider attending one or sending a friend to one of our training programs. Now, it's my pleasure to present to you Carolyn Shaver. She's a junior at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and studies political science there. As an intern here at the Leadership Institute, Caroline works with Campus Reform, our campus news website, and she does both reporting and filming. In the future, Caroline says she would very much like to remain active in the conservative movement, and for better or for worse, she's considering law school. Caroline.
All right, if you'll join me in prayer. Lord God, I pray for all who are in authority, and I thank you especially for the form of government given us in our beloved country. Endow our leaders with wisdom for their duties, with a spirit of sacrifice, with mercy and justice, with uprightness and kindliness. Give us also the grace to respect our leaders. I pray that you would defend us from attack, confound those who would deprive us of our freedom, and the evil efforts of those who intend to cause pain, suffering, and death. I pray also that you would protect those who wear the uniform of our country and who serve with courage, honor, and commitment. Comfort and strengthen our sailors, Marines, soldiers, airmen, and Coast Guards. Be also with their loved ones who wait at home while they go to far and distant lands answering the call of duty. I thank you for the opportunity for us to meet together today. Bless our discussions and our speaker. We boldly ask these blessings in your name. Amen. And if you'll join us in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Well done. Now, it's my honor to introduce Cabot Phillips for the programs report. Cabot is the editor-in-chief now of the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform, having previously served there with great distinction as the media director. Prior to joining Campus Reform, Cabot spent his time working on numerous campaigns, most recently as the digital grassroots director for Marco Rubio's presidential bid in 2016. In 2016, Cabot was named to Red Alert Politics 30 Under 30 list of the nation's most influential young conservatives. And if you had to make a smaller list these days, fewer than 30, Cabot would still be on the list. Cabot.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is good to see you. Like Morton said, I'm the editor-in-chief of the Leadership Institute's campusreform.org. So we expose liberal bias on college campuses, as many of you know. So every day we are reporting on tips that we get from our college campuses around the country. We have a team last year of 105 student reporters that are on the ground, that are exposing what's going on in the classroom, from administrations, professors, any misuse of our taxpayer dollars on college campuses, which is quite often. Those are the kinds of things that we're reporting on. And I think right now our work is more necessary than ever. And I want to give you a little update on some of my favorite stories recently that we've covered to give you guys an idea of what campus reform is about and what we're hoping to accomplish this year. And I hear people say, there is no liberal bias on college campuses. Do we really need to reform our campuses? I actually had a gentleman ask me 2 weeks ago during an interview. He said, are campuses really that bad? Are they really that one-sided? To which I will point them to a study that we covered at Campus Reform on our website, where the National Association of Scholars, they looked at 12,000 professors in 31 states, the 31 states that were listing their political donations for state employees. 12,000 professors, and they looked at who they donated to politically. Now, of those 12,000 professors, how many do you think are Republican or conservative supporters? Just throw a number out there. 12,000. How many do you think? 22. 22 out of 12,000. Now, that's a pretty good way to decide what someone's political leanings are, what they're doing in their own personal life, who they're donating to. If you look at the ratio, for every one conservative or Republican donor, there were 95 donating to the other side, a 95-to-1 ratio. You'd think more people would just accidentally hit the Republican side when they were donating, and the number would be higher. So that is what we're up against on college campuses, a 95-to-1 ratio of professors holding one side of the opinion. And that's what we're combating right now. And the left does not like it. One of my favorite stories that we've had this past month, Trinity College up in Connecticut posted a job posting on their website where, because of our work, because of the fact that we are exposing what they're doing and what liberal universities are doing to conservative students and students of all political affiliations, they posted a job posting on their website hiring a campus reform watchdog. And the university on their website announced that they wanted someone to be a, quote, campus reform first responder. Now, this person would be paid by the university to monitor campus reform, to then be a watchdog to us, even though we're actually the watchdog to them. And I think the fact that the universities now are getting so afraid of our work that they are hiring people to watch what we're doing shows that they know that we're influencing what they're doing. They know that we are exposing what's going on. We always say here, light is the best disinfectant, and we're trying to shine a light on what's going on in universities. Some other stories that I've loved from this year that we've helped empower students. One student sent us a tip, and they said, I wrote a paper, and I lost points because I cited the Bible in my paper. And the professor said I lost points because of, quote, church and state. They said, separation of church and state, you lost points because you cited the Bible. So we ended up writing a story on that. It went viral. All sorts of people were offering support to the student, making sure the university knew that people were paying attention to what's going on. Like Morton said, I know a lot of you guys watched the State of the Union last night. I was pretty fired up last night. I was running laps around my apartment. I was pretty fired up. I was just yelling America over and over because I was feeling pretty good about how things are going. And we made a new video for campus reform. You may have seen it on the Drudge Report yesterday. We're up nearing 500,000 views in the first 24 hours on our video, where I went to a college here in DC, American University, before we were kicked off, which is a totally different story. And I asked students, I said, I have some State of the Union quotes for you here. I want to get your opinion. It's the State of the Union transcript has been released from President Trump, and I read them, a lot of the quotes, and everyone said, well, these quotes are awful. Of course, these are racist quotes. These quotes are unbefitting of anyone to sit in the White House. And then I told them these actually aren't President Trump's State of the Union quotes. These are actually quotes from Democrat candidates in 2020. And all of these supposedly racist quotes don't belong to Trump. They actually belong to all of these other candidates that you tend to love. Are they still racist quotes? Do you still think these people aren't fit to sit in the White House? And it was very enjoyable to watch their responses. And you can go to campusreform.org and watch that video yourself. But we did have some light bulb moments of people realizing, well, maybe I am a little biased. Maybe I do need to expand my horizons. And that's what we're trying to do. And because of Morton's support and because of our generous donors who have helped to make possible what we do, we're able to have more and more of those light bulb moments for students where they realize, maybe I'm being misled by my professors. Maybe what I'm being told constantly by the media, by my administration, by the pressure on my campus, maybe that's not true. Maybe there's more to it. And I think we're having more and more students wake up to that reality when they hear both sides, when they think for themselves, when they're taught how to think critically, not just what to think. We all know that our ideas win when our ideas are able to reach them. And at Campus Forum, we're working on giving those students a chance. And universities now know that they're going to have to hire people to keep an eye on us because they don't want us keeping an eye on them. And we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to work to hold universities accountable, make sure they know that when they are pushing a liberal ideology on students, not giving them a chance to make up their own minds, we're going to be there to report on it. And again, we can only do that because of the support of our donors, the people in this room, and especially because of Morton's leadership. And so that's what we're doing at Campus Reform. I'm very excited what we have coming this year, but we are, again, grateful for the support of everyone in this room, and we're going to keep at it. Our work's cut out for us.
Nice stuff. The ability to break stories like these and expose liberal bias to the public eye is, we should never forget, due only to the continuous and generous support of donors to the Leadership Institute. And now, to introduce our outstanding speaker, I'm going to have Chris Olson come up here. He is the Communications and Studio Intern. Last fall, he served as the Leadership Institute field representative for the state of South Carolina. Prior to working with the Leadership Institute, he attended California Baptist University, where he graduated with a degree in political science with a concentration in American institutions and processes. Chris, come up and introduce our speaker.
Good morning. Well, joining us this morning is Jon Miller. Jon is a White House correspondent and host of the White House Brief on Blaze TV. In addition to Blaze TV, Jon has also worked for Mercury Radio Arts and Fox News. Jon has dedicated much of his time while working in the media to fighting leftist bias and attacks against fellow black conservatives such as himself. Jon was introduced to conservatism through reading the likes of Whittaker Chambers, Russell Kirk, William F. Buckley Jr., Barry Goldwater, Edmund Burke, and my personal favorite, Frederick Hayek. This morning, Jon will be talking about all things regarding the state of the union, his career, and his coming into politics. And I cannot think of a better speaker to kick off our 2020 Wednesday Wake Up Club Breakfast series than Jon Miller. Give it up for Jon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the Leadership Institute for having me. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell, for having me. That list, I sat down next to Mr. Blackwell, and the list of authors that introduced me to conservatism, he asked me, okay, I know this is the list that we said you read in college, but who did you actually read? And it turns out that was actually the list of people who I read, because they all are on your Read to Lead guide. And it turns out that just everyone who introduced me to conservatism ended up being on that list. But I went to Columbia University, extremely liberal. I don't even know if liberal is the right term for the university, because it's essentially a Marxist campus. And I graduated 2011, so about 8 years ago. I'm in politics, not math. So 7 or 8 years ago, I graduated. It's not nearly as bad. It was not nearly as bad back then as it is now, and it was bad back then. And so I was trying to find myself, and I grew up in a completely non-political household. My dad was a jazz musician. My mother was in horseback riding. So I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to go to law school. I didn't want to be a doctor. And so I was like, well, what do I do? And they said, well, you go into media. That's what you do when you don't know what else to do. So I was like, well, okay, I'm going to do politics. We didn't have a political household, so I didn't know where I felt politically. And because my parents weren't political, they didn't say, well, you have to be a Democrat. Because when you're in a black family, lots of times people say you have to vote Democrat. That's just what we do. I was fortunate enough so that my parents did not have to say that to me. And so I said, well, what do I believe in? How was I raised? Well, I was raised in a faith-based household. I was raised to believe in individual liberty. I was raised to believe in working for yourself and working hard to earn what you get. And so that kind of just led me to conservatism naturally. And then I got to college, and my dad said right before I got to college, he said, okay, son, you have to understand about these universities. Either you're going to get there and you're going to become a far leftist, because that's what they all are, or you're going to go completely in the other direction and become an extreme right-wing crazy person. And I said, oh, I don't know what that means, Dad. And he said, you'll see. And so I got to Columbia University, and I said, okay, well, I kind of aligned more with Republicans. So I joined the college Republicans when I got to Columbia. And the first meeting that we went to, they said, oh, well, we need to compromise, because our party has become too radical. Our party has become too extreme. This stuff about not compromising with the Democrats, really, growing government, that's what we all have to do at this point. We just need to get together with the Democrats and do that. And I sat there and I said, I'm not really sure this is the right club for me. I'm not really sure I fit in here. If you're talking about working with the Democrats and compromising your beliefs on individual liberty, compromising your beliefs on economic responsibility, if you're talking about your beliefs on completely growing government, because we were in the era of McCain, which is grow government and abandon the free market to save the free market. We were in that era, 2008 about. I was thinking, I'm not sure I want to be a part of the college Republicans. So I went and I applied for an internship with this guy named Glenn Beck. And I had never heard of him. And I said, oh, I guess he's a conservative radio guy. I kind of want to see what this is about. I kind of want to get involved. And because I was lucky to be in New York City, I said, okay, well, I'm going to take this internship. I walked into at the time it was Mercury Radio Arts was the name of his outlet. And it was a radio studio, and I interviewed there, and he hired me on the spot. And he said, we need more people like you in the movement who are going to actually speak out and who are actually going to buck the trend in college. And again, we have the craziness now that Cabot's showing, which is that you go to places like Georgetown University and they're not even teaching American exceptionalism. They're not even teaching the things that used to just be considered American ideas, that used to just be considered historical concepts. They're not teaching that stuff. And so he said, we need more people who are actually going to actively fight. And so I said, well, how do I actively fight? And he said, you'll figure it out. Just go to your classes and actually speak and write about what you believe. And so I did that. I went to my classes. I wrote from a conservative perspective, and I found myself getting C's on papers. And I went to my professors and I said, can you explain to me what exactly was wrong with this paper? What was your contention with the paper? And they said, well, it was well researched. It was well written. It was well thought out, but you arrived at the wrong conclusion. And I actually had a professor who said that to me. And I said, this is incredible. So at that point, I just said, you know what, screw it. I had a professor, his name was Rashid Khalidi. And Rashid Khalidi is a good friend of Obama. He's a Hamas supporter. And so I just started going into his classes with a little recorder and recording his lectures. And then I would go to Glenn Beck's show on Fox News, and we would play his lectures. And that's, and I'm not sure what I was very early on in the journalistic world, and so I think now I don't know how we got away with that, but we did, and I'm glad we did, because it exposed a lot of what was being taught on college campuses, and it exposed that it was not just a little bit biased, but that it was extremely radical, and that the Democrat Party and the people on the left, these are not the leftists that you grew up with. These are not the people who, you can get together with at the dinner table. These are not the people who believe in anything that you believe. And at this point, I believe that compromise with them is completely futile. It's completely futile. Where do we stand? Where do we compromise with what the Democrats of today believe? Where do we compromise with the things that the modern left believes, when they believe that not just in the first trimester, but literally after birth, you can actually take the life of a child? Where do you compromise with that? Where do you compromise with when the president in a speech says we will not become a socialist country, and the Democrats sit because they have a number of people in their caucus who believe we do need to be a socialist country? We do not have just, it's not even democratic socialism anymore. Bernie Sanders, when he first ran for his congressional seat, he said, I am a socialist, and everybody knows it. And everybody does know it. And now we're looking at Iowa, we're looking at the Iowa caucus, and he is somebody who I think they bungled it, and that's a whole other story. They completely bungled that, and how embarrassing for them. But it looks like he's gonna win that thing. And it looks like he has a good shot of maybe even winning the Democratic nomination. In fact, back in 2016, he probably would have won the Democratic nomination if he didn't have Crooked Hill come in and screw the whole thing up and rig the system. And Donna Brazile admitted that happened. But I think, when you have Democrats like this, where exactly do you compromise with them? Where is the point of compromise? And I think last night was such a perfect example of that, when you had the president give an excellent speech. I mean, was that speech fantastic or what? I thought that was a fantastic speech. And then Nancy Pelosi, obviously, she didn't agree. She didn't think it was such. And just to see her take a speech, which I thought was unifying, you had a unifying speech, and just to see her take it, and I'm surprised, to be honest, that she could even muster up the strength at this point to rip it up into pieces. But she ripped up the speech, and it's so representative of the country. You have the president who's delivering a unifying speech. You have the president talking about, because of the governor of Pennsylvania, because he vetoed school choice, you have this little girl, this little African-American girl, who was denied, or at least was put on a wait list, couldn't get tax credits for the school she wanted to go to, and the president is offering her a scholarship to go to her school of choice, and the Democrats are angry about it? The Democrats look at this girl, they look at this mom hugging this little girl because she finally gets to get an education she wants that she wasn't able to get due to liberal policies, and they sit for that. You have Trump lauding a 100-year-old Tuskegee airman, an African-American airman, and a war hero, and his great-grandson who wants to also go to space. Donald Trump talking about him with such pride, and the Democrats are furious about that? Where do you compromise with that, where you have a soldier who is reunited with his family at the State of the Union and they're angry about it? What world are we living in? Where do we say, okay, well, we want to work together with you? You don't, and you have to defeat them. That's our only option. That's our only option. I mean, you've got the female unemployment numbers at record lows, and they all sat. They all sat there. They all had their white on because of the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage and in the 19th Amendment, and they sat because women are finally working. And you have to wonder, okay, well then are you rabid traditionalist? Are you saying that, okay, well then maybe women don't want to work, maybe women want to start families? What exactly is your message when you sit for that message? And so while you have the president trying to bring us together, and I truly think he could have gotten up there, he could have said the Democrats are trying to impeach me, he could have said the Democrats are working against me, this is a witch hunt. He could have gone full Trump beast mode and done that thing. And instead, he didn't. He stayed away and he talked about things that bring us together. And meanwhile, the Democrats are furiously trying to divide us. And I understand why they're mad. I mean, wouldn't you be mad if you were in their position? Wouldn't you be mad if the Results app broke? The Results app? They have the Results app. Did the same guy who designed the Results app design the website for the Affordable Care Act? Remember that website? It was the first ever website that could put you on hold. I don't know how they design these things, but the website, you go to the website and it puts you on hold like a rotary phone. So and it turns out the person who actually worked on that app was a guy named Robbie Mook. You guys all know Robbie Mook. He worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign. So the first thing that's obviously popping into people's minds is this somebody who intentionally bungled this? And they said, oh no, it wasn't intentional, it wasn't a glitch, it was just a miscount. We still don't have the results. Yesterday they said, well, at 4 p.m. we're going to announce half the results. Half the results for the Iowa caucus? And that completely deprives any momentum, so they've screwed themselves for this entire primary now because they got off on the wrong foot, and now Iowa is completely irrelevant, and they have a guy named Pete Buttigieg who is in the lead, and we're told that Joe Biden is the presumptive front runner. I said from the beginning, there's no way this guy is actually the front runner. I don't care what the polls say. You know, these are the same pollsters who brought you the amazing fantasy that was the 2016 election that Trump was never going to win. They're saying that Joe Biden is the front runner, and I'm saying you look at the party, you look at what's happening in our country, you look at the schools, you look at what the schools are teaching, you look at the fact that such a large number of young people believe socialism is the way of the future. There's no way that Joe Biden, who is more or less one of the more moderate candidates, is in the lead. And it's true, he's not in the lead. In Iowa, he's head and head with Amy Klobuchar. He's barely in fourth place because moderacy has no place in the Democrat Party. And Joe Biden, as much as he tries to, through his stumbled sentences and forgetting where he is and forgetting what he's doing, aside from all of that, he still has represented a more moderate wing of the party. That's not where the party is. And I think Nancy Pelosi was infuriated by that last night. And the question was, when she ripped that speech, was she doing that to show a sign of solidarity with her party, to show, look, I hate Trump as much as you do? Or was it simply her own rage and that she couldn't contain herself? I think it was the latter. I think she's lost so control of her party. She also represented a more moderate wing of that party. And instead, which is crazy because, you know, the fact that she's the moderate, the fact that Nancy Pelosi is the moderate is insane, but it's true. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, they are the new leaders of the Democrat Party. That's where the party is. And so again, I have to ask, where do you compromise with them? And you don't. And so I'm so impressed with the president, with his tenacity, with his tirelessness, with his indefatigability. It's really otherworldly when you think about it because he literally has people who are stepping on his throat. He has people who are trying to thwart him every step of the way, and he is still getting things done. He has the Democrats who are trying to stop him. Every time he tries to get a piece of legislation passed, the Democrats get in his way. You have the courts who are a huge issue because the courts think they are just power, they are omnipotent, the courts think they can do whatever they want. Every time the president tries to get something done, the courts get in the way, they try to stop it. They don't actually have that power. They shouldn't actually be doing that. It's judicial supremacy, and yet they think they can because they are ideologues, they are rogue judges who are stepping out of place. You have them, believe it or not, you've got people within Trump's administration who are thwarting him, who are trying to get in the way, and who are trying to actually stop him from doing the things that he promised. If you didn't have all of those forces, we wouldn't even need to have Trump for a second term because he would have been able to get everything done. Great example of that is the border. Great example of that is immigration. You have everyone trying to, including the courts, including Congress, and again, there are certain people within Trump's administration whom I believe do not actually agree with him on actually securing the border. And if he didn't have those people, we'd have a border wall. We would actually have a secure border because the president has the power to shut down. And I think in many ways it probably goes too far, but he does have the power vested in him to actually shut down the border if he wants. The president of the United States has the ability to choose who comes in and out of the country. And the Congress can come in and they can say, well, we're not going to let you do that. But at the end of the day, that is, and if you believe in limited government, one of the few things that the executive branch, that the government is responsible for, is actually securing the country, is actually securing the border. Because that's how you defend our freedom. If you can't defend our borders, and if you can't actually decide the kinds of people who come in and what those people believe, you can't actually defend the freedoms that we believe in this country, because the people who come in are coming from places who don't believe in those freedoms. And you have people who are coming in who don't actually hold our values, and who don't actually understand what makes our country great, who don't actually love our Constitution. You get people like Ilhan Omar. You get people like her who, she's not an illegal immigrant, but I don't believe she's been properly assimilated. The kind of hatred that she outwardly displays to the country is astonishing. And so the kind of, and so I think it is so important to actually have assimilation. And so you can't just let anyone willy-nilly into the country, because you have to have people who believe in America, who believe in our creed, who believe in what we believe in, and who revere our Constitution and who revere our Bill of Rights, who understand our Bill of Rights, who are not trying to take away our First Amendment, who are not trying to take away our Second Amendment, and who are not trying to sit there and say that Americans are not great. And that's essentially what they did when they didn't show up to the speech. That's exactly what AOC did when she didn't show up to the speech last night. You have people who are satisfied with what the president is doing, and that's another thing that's driving the Democrats crazy, is that the president's approval rating is the highest it's ever been. It's higher than Obama's was at this point. And so you have, and I think that that's what drove Nancy Pelosi to rip up that speech, is that she's trying to do all of this. She had this impeachment. Today, the president is going to be acquitted, right? The president's going to be acquitted today. And Nancy Pelosi has been trying to impeach him. She listened to the far left wing of her party that originally Nancy Pelosi didn't want to impeach the president. And then she said, okay, well, she caved. Didn't work for her. President's getting acquitted today. He gave a great speech last night. His approval rating is higher than it's ever been. So I think that was just a shred of rage that she went into, because she has failed as a speaker. And you look at the satisfaction with the issues. The economy, 68% of people say they are pleased with the economy. Since Trump's election, the economy has created 7 million new jobs. I mean, that's a huge number. 7 million, and a lot of things that people aren't talking about is the USMCA. You can have your thoughts on that. But the fact of the matter is, almost 200,000 jobs have been created. Workers, farmers, manufacturers. Jobs have been created because of that. The unemployment rate recently hit its lowest mark in 50 years. Stock market keeps breaking records. The president is rolling back regulations. Remember, we said, well, if we can get one, or if we can get 2 regulations rolled back for every 1 regulation added, that will be good. Instead, the president has rolled back 8 regulations for every new one. 8 regulations for every new regulation. I mean, that's shrinking government. That is the process of shrinking government. I don't care what you say about some of his other policies. Rolling back regulations has been huge, and it works because he has saved Americans 50, I don't remember the exact figure, and I have $50 in my notes, which I know is not actually correct, but it has saved the Americans a ton of money in the process. And then there's, you're told the farmers hate Trump. It turns out 83% of farmers and ranchers are approving of the president's job performance. It's the highest level of support that he's received among farmers since he's taken office. His support is huge, and he's defeating ISIS in the Middle East. His foreign policy is, we're trying to determine what exactly is the Trump doctrine. And Iran is probably going to be his biggest struggle, and whether he's more isolationist or whether he's more interventionalist. And I think we all know he wants to withdraw from the Middle East. It's just a matter of how to do that. And so at least he has defeated ISIS. And so when it comes to military, the vast majority of the American people are satisfied with the strength, with the preparedness of our military, despite everyone telling you that he's trying to start World War III. We have the most powerful military in the world, and we don't use it unless we have to. And I think that is also the limited government perspective. You have a strong military, but you use it only when you need to. We have 2.1 million in military personnel. We're ranked number 1 in total aircraft, with 13.4 thousand of them. Ranked number 1 in fighter aircraft, with 2.4 thousand of them. We're ranked third in combat tanks with 6.4 thousand. 24 aircraft carriers. Our defense budget is 16 times that of the next highest defense budget, which is Russia. We have who is the second most powerful military. And yet, Trump's ideology says we don't use it unless we have to. We've got Bolton, who's sitting there saying we've got to use it everywhere. And then we've got Trump, who's saying, okay, well, we don't want to use it as much. And so I think the Trump administration is in the process of trying to figure out exactly how their foreign policy is going to unfold. And I think we're going to start to see what exactly the Trump doctrine is. But the fact of the matter is that voters voted to get out of the Middle East. Voters voted to stop these endless wars, and that was a big campaign promise that Trump made. And so I think that's a big campaign promise that he's going to need to keep. And I think that that's something that a lot of people within his administration maybe don't agree with him on, but it doesn't really matter because that's what the American people voted on. That was a huge campaign promise along with the border. Now, when it comes to race relationships, it's very interesting because that's somewhere where Trump is not exactly, the majority of people are not satisfied with Trump when it comes to race relations. And a lot of people will say, oh, it's Trump's rhetoric. Oh, it's Trump. Trump is a racist. Trump is a Nazi. Trump is a white supremacist. Anytime you're left of Ruth Bader, anytime you're right of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they call you a white supremacist. I go to my email and people are calling me a white supremacist. And it's just, and so at a certain point, you just have to ignore the racist title. You have to ignore the white supremacist title. But interestingly, the satisfaction numbers with race relations in this country are slightly below half of the country. And I think that is not because Trump is a racist, but we have, as I had mentioned earlier, the issues with illegal immigration, and you have people who are not assimilated. I mean, when you have sanctuary cities, last night we had Jody Jones, whose brother Rocket was killed by an illegal immigrant who was imprisoned 6 times. Deported, imprisoned 6 times. He was let out because he was intoxicated, and under California's sanctuary city laws, you can get intoxicated. It's a misdemeanor. They let you out. ICE faxes in a detainer, and then basically they ignore it. They let him out. Jody Jones' brother Rocket was killed in a shooting spree at a gas station because of these insane sanctuary city laws. I mean, you don't think that kind of policy, when you have this influx of people from Central, South America, fuels race, at least animosity? When you have people who are literally beating kids up on a bus, you had a white kid, and they said he was wearing a MAGA hat, and then a group of black kids came up and they just started beating him, or beating the kid, and it turns out he wasn't even wearing a MAGA hat. When you have a group of Covington Catholic boys who are literally vilified by the Washington Post, by CNN, by these major institutions, literally they make enemies of them simply because they're white and Trump supporters. You don't think that fuels racial animosity? You think it's Trump's rhetoric? I mean, they smeared those boys to the point now where the Nick Sandmann has won a lawsuit. But they smeared those boys, and it was simply because of the color of their skin. They dropped the, you can't touch children. You have little Greta Thunberg, who you're not allowed to say anything about. You're not allowed to criticize her. You have all of these children. You have, what's that little guy? What's the little with the skinny arms? What's his name? The gun guy, the gun control guy. David Hogg. You've got David Hogg. You're not allowed to say anything about David Hogg. Guy can't spell, right? He's at Harvard University, which comes to show you, who these kind of people these universities are letting in. But you're not allowed to criticize him. But when it comes to someone like Nick Sandman and the Covington Catholic boys, you're allowed to make up lies about them. You're allowed to say that they're harassing this Native American man who was literally in his face beating the drum. All of that stuff, and the media is complicit in it, is fueling racial animosity. And these are really big problems within the country. Because I don't think that Obama did us any favors when it came to race relations. I think Obama was one of the most divisive presidents we have ever had. And I think that when it comes down to how we need to go forward in this country, race relations is going to be a huge thing because they are getting worse. They're not getting better. We're going in the wrong direction. I think Obama kind of sparked that because I honestly think if we had a president who was not as radical as Obama, we wouldn't be in the situation we are because every criticism you made of Obama, I don't want the government taking over 1/6 of the United States economy with healthcare. I don't want that. I don't believe in massive spending. I don't believe in complete redistribution. I don't believe in a complete transformation of America as we know it. I don't believe in the pen and the phone approach to government. If he hadn't done all of that, I think we would be in a place where people wouldn't have, people start to get more extreme because they're called racist, because you criticize Obama's policies, you were called a racist, you were called a Nazi, and now anytime you espouse a certain conservative point of view, you're called a Nazi for it. And I think, I think we're in a place where it's going to get worse, and that's where we need to start focusing on are the issues that matter to the American people. And so that's kind of what I do, and I have a program, it's called the White House Brief, and I came to DC, and I was originally a producer, and they said, we want you to be a White House correspondent. And I said, what? I've never done on-camera work, I've never been in front of a camera, so what do I do? And they said, well, you just go to the White House, and you'll report on the stories, and you'll do some reporting, and I said, okay, fine. Seems easy enough. And all of the stories there that people were talking about were things that did not matter to the American people whatsoever. Oh, who's eating lunch today? What's on the menu? Who's being fired today? All these names I didn't hear about. I said, well, what if I just reported on the things that actually matter to the American people, which are the things that I've just talked about? What if I actually talked about things that Americans care about, that actually affect Americans' lives, their daily lives, and what they do? What if we actually talked about the things that the president is doing to improve the country? Because the American people, they voted for a president who was going to revive the American economy. The American people voted for a president who was going to stand up for the American worker. The American people voted for a president who was going to get tough on immigration, who was going to be strong on crime, and who was going to end foreign wars and stop selling out to foreign interests. And that's what they got. And those are the issues that the American people care about, and those are the issues that I think that the American journalists have a duty to report on. They're not doing that, and so that's what I attempt to do with my program. You can catch it on Blaze TV. You can catch it, I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jon Miller. Catch my videos, go there. But we talk about all of the things that are actually affecting the American people, not the palace intrigue and not all the nonsense that occupies the White House Correspondents Association. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Thank you guys, and I appreciate you guys listening to me.
Questions? Raise your hand. In the back.
Hello, Mr. Miller. Thank you for coming to the Leadership Institute and speaking. I'm an intern here. I'm from upstate New York, and right now I'm a campaign manager for, as far as we know, the only black Republican running in the state. What kind of advice would you give to him on some of the difficulties he's going to face being a black Republican?
The difficulties are immense, and my advice would be just to ignore them. Because you're going to get them. I mean, the thing about being a black conservative is that you get it harder than anybody else, simply because everyone else around you is a liberal. So, I remember my first Thanksgiving dinner when I decided, okay, I guess I'm a conservative. And politics came up at the table. And literally every single person around you is a liberal. And some of them are actually active Democrats, and some of them are just, kind of liberal in mentality. But the fact of the matter is, you have to defend yourself. So I remember, end of high school, college, I'm going and I'm literally battling people at my Thanksgiving table, and you're forced to actually solidify yourself in your arguments. You're forced to actually figure out, what do I believe, and be able to defend yourself. But they're going to call you all sorts of names. I mean, the names that get thrown at black conservatives, and you just get used to them. You really do, but they call you House Negro, they call you Coon, Uncle Tom, which are names that, were favored by the KKK. So the fact that the modern Democrat Party is using them makes you wonder, has this party really evolved, or are they exactly the same as they were when they were burning crosses in their fields? But he just has to be prepared for that. But I would say it's great. He should speak to black issues, but he should also speak to all issues. I think something that a lot of black conservatives do is they focus solely on black issues. I think there is an obligation, in the same way you wouldn't want a white candidate to focus simply on white issues, to focus on issues for everybody. But in terms of what he should be prepared for, just be prepared for everything. Be prepared to be called an Uncle Tom. Be prepared to be called a white supremacist, because you will be called that as well. Right here in the white sweater.
Hi, my name is Barbara Dallow, and first I want to say I want to agree with you about the harm Obama did to race relations. My granddaughter's interracial, and she was about 5 years old when she was arguing with me about how bad I was because I didn't agree with Obama's policies. But finally I got wise and I gave her the book, The Conservative Heart. And anyway, by Arthur Brooks. But my question is this. Sometimes I think many people in my age group cannot fathom the possibility that we will have someone as liberal as the liberal wing of the Democratic Party as our next president, who might win the 220 election. Do you think that's a realistic possibility?
No, I don't think that they have a shot. I don't believe that the country is where they are. You look at the president's approval numbers. You look at the kinds of policies that they are proposing. I believe that the Democrat Party believes strongly in those ideas. And I believe they're a larger number than people think. But at the end of the day, I do not believe America is yet in a place where they are willing to go to socialism. I believe that there are enough Americans, young Americans, we have to work on them. But there are enough old Americans who remember the evils of socialism and who, maybe favor stronger government, but they're not socialists, they're not communists, they're not Bernie Sanders. And so I just don't think they have a shot, A, because of their ideology, but B, because they're not strong candidates. They don't have what it takes. They don't have the strength, they don't have the charisma. They have a really weak batch of candidates. They have a lot of them, but none of them actually have what it takes to defeat Trump. When it comes to the debate stage, I think they would falter. So I really don't think it's a possibility. Don't want to get cocky and don't want to get arrogant, and we still got to work hard, but I don't think that they have a shot.
Thank you so much. Knowing that the Democrats will do everything they can to exploit the racism issue, can you expand on how the Black community, the Latino community either compete with one another, and also with regards to the Black population in our prisons, how they are being recruited or prophesized by the Islamic imams that are now going into our prisons, especially in light of the fact that it was the Arab community who were the ones continuing today to exploit slavery in Africa. Thank you.
So thank you for your question. So the latter is something that I'm not as familiar with, so I'm not going to speak to that, because that's something before I speak on it, like to look more into, which I think it's fascinating. To speak to your first part of your question, the Latino community versus the Black community, it's not that there's animosity between the two. It's that you have illegal immigrants who are taking Black jobs. And so, you have this mantra that you keep on hearing that the illegals, they do the jobs that Americans just won't do. And there's literally nothing more false in the world. There's no evidence to support that. There's not a single industry that is dominated by illegal immigrants. And in fact, when they did the ICE raids in Mississippi, what happened when they removed the illegal immigrants from the job? Who lined up to take those jobs? It was African Americans. It was largely African Americans. And so I wouldn't put it as Latinos versus African Americans as much as there are jobs to be had that African Americans would love to do, and they are most affected by this. And instead, you have illegals who come at a cheaper rate and who take those jobs, and it's really hurting the African American communities, and it's really depriving them of jobs that they deserve because they are citizens and the illegals are not. It comes down, and it's as simple as that. And the African American community deserves to be able to work. They have that right, and they are being deprived of that right because of our insecure borders. All right, thank you, everybody. That was the last question. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, John. We appreciate your coming, and wait. Let me present to you, as a token of our appreciation, one of the Leadership Institute's Adam Smith ties.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for watching this video. To watch our latest video, click here. And to make sure you don't miss any future videos, be sure to subscribe.